Conversations. And we have another new friend tonight. Let me give you a little background before we bring him to the digital stage. On May 22nd, 2020, Push Black, the leading online community for Black Americans, released season one of its highly anticipated Black History Year podcast. The 6 episode series connects listeners with Black thinkers and activists that have been left out of the mainstream conversations. Within the first 24 hours, the podcast reached number one on in the Apple Podcast History category, and number 6 of all podcasts streaming on Apple. Black History, the Black History Year podcast amassed, check this out, people, you got to be impressed, over 20,000 subscribers in the first 48 hours. That is out of bounds, folks. I've been doing live broadcasts for years. 20,000, I think I've had that like I've had more than 20,000 listeners over the year, but I never had that in like 48 hours. Boom. The podcast episodes touch on the myriad of topics not discussed in other mainstream platforms, including fear of the Black woman's body, Black gun ownership, religion in Black America, young Black millionaires, and a host of others. They've had a myriad of guests on their platform. The thought-provoking series is the latest in the content built by Push Black to engage and educate Black Americans and Black America about their history and create a more engaged population of Black voters. We have the interim CEO of Push Black here tonight, but before I give you his name, a little bit more about Push Black. If you haven't heard about it, and I'll be honest and transparent, I did not hear about it till the wonderful lady Milana of the Spears Group sent me a press release to say, I got to get these people on. So Push Black is America's largest media advocacy organization for Black Americans, currently serving, again, real numbers, 9 million people across all platforms, including 5 million subscribers on Facebook Messenger. Wow. They use the power of narrative, especially Black history, to educate and activate their subscribers to build their personal power and create lasting economic and political change. Let us welcome for the first time and not the last time, Julian Walker, interim CEO of Push Black. What is up, my man? How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you, Dr. Vibe, man? Thanks for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. I've been looking forward to this since I first talked to Milana. And I said, got to get this group on. So I'm glad to have you. I know you got a lot of things going on, so we're going to squeeze the most out of you with the little time you can give us tonight. So let's give it a start. A little bit of background about yourself.
Sure. So let's see, man. I'm from the South. I am from Arkansas. Grew up in the heat, in the country, blue collar family for the most part. And really coming up, man, in the community I was in, my grandfather was a civil rights attorney. And so we were always in the community, always seeing him move around and having a certain level of care and advocacy for our community. So growing up, when I decided, was trying to figure out what I was going to do, I wanted my purpose to be aligned with that. I went into storytelling, though. I didn't go into politics or the legal field like he did. I went into filmmaking. So I started crafting an understanding of narrative and communicating with our community using different elements of filmmaking and new media. Went to school, got a MFA in directing and writing in Chicago, and then started working in digital media online with a company called Atlanta Black Star a couple years ago. They're based down here where I'm currently at in Atlanta. And that's really where I learned to shape my ability to communicate with large numbers of Black people online through the videos that I was doing for them. Then a couple of my buddies started Push Black around the same time and brought me on board to lead the creative process and the content creation and guide all the vision for that. So I've been with Push Black now for 5 years in that type of role.
Wow.
I was the chief content officer up until recently, and currently serving as the interim co-CEO.
Wonderful. When you were approached about joining the Push Black team, what was your first response? Was it something saying, yeah, this is the right thing at the right time, or did you have to ponder it for a bit?
It was a no-brainer because these were guys that I've known for years now, and anything that they do or that they did, I knew was solid. I knew how much they cared about the community. So at that point, Push Black was just starting out, so it wasn't a big commitment. I was a contractor at first when they were just getting it off the ground. It was just the two of them. Then they brought me on board, so we were trying to figure things out, and yeah, we just grew from there. I can't quite hear you. Is
No,
that I can't.
no, I just saying, could you just share with us the history, the mission, the values of the organization?
Absolutely. So Push Black started around 2015. It was founded by Daryl Scott and Tariq Alani, two good friends of mine, and they realized that there was a need for the Black community to have a certain type of publication that we really haven't seen since the turn of the century, over 100 years ago, with all these Black newspapers that were once out and really advocating for Black voices in a very particular type of way. This was only about, within 50 years post slavery. So they drew on that for inspiration for Push Black, and just started sending out simple lists of stories that they thought Black people would care about. It really just started as a Google document and an email list of a couple dozen people, and then they realized that folks were really engaging with it. So we transformed that to do more curated content through an email list, and then we did a lot of testing. Our whole strategy is based on what's known as the lean methodology, which is from this book and this book called The Lean Startup Guide. And what they talk about here is sort of three key tenets of build, measure, learn. So instead of just putting out something that we think that people want, we did a bunch of testing to build something, measure the success of that, learn from that, from those success metrics, and then iterate and start all over. It's like a cycle. So we put these small tests out with as little resources as possible, just to see if this idea would catch on. And what we found is that, yeah, people really wanted this content, and surprising to us is they wanted Black history content specifically. And I say it's surprising because I personally love Black history. I love learning about it and sharing it with other folks, but the way it's usually given to us is not that interesting. And I think part of that is intentional for reasons we may get into later, but I think that they don't want us to be as engaged. So we found a way to get folks engaged in our history through our practice of putting together content in the way that we do. So we started with a list of a couple dozen people, and then we grew over the years through this rigorous testing process to where we are now, which is reaching 9 million, mostly
That's
Black folks
crazy.
across the
That's
country.
crazy.
Yeah,
That's crazy. Like that's out of bounds. Congratulations on all the work the team has done to reach
thank you.
that. Well, that amount of followers, obviously it sounded like there was a plan. Was it your goal or the organization's goal to reach that in a certain period of time, or was that we're going to reach that when we reach that?
Yeah, so we set goals as we went along. First, we had a hypothesis because we reached this many people. We were super excited when we got to 200,000 folks, and it's like, okay, let's get to a million, let's get to two, and then over time we just kept on moving the goalposts to the point where it's like, okay, now we reach over 12% of the Black population in America. Push
Wow,
of a button.
that's impressive. That is really impressive.
Thank you.
I want to cycle back to your personal history just for a few moments. Where did the love of the arts come in? Because you said your father was involved in law, political stuff. Where did you get the influence to take the journey of where you've gone down this road?
Thank you. Good question. So my grandfather was involved in law and politics. And that's a good question. My grandmother was actually, she's a very talented visual artist. Um, and I was always sort of drawn to the creative aspects of communication. So I grew up seeing art in her home. She did amazing artwork. An uncle of mine is a very talented musician as well. So we definitely have some folks in the family that are super talented. And I think that I started noticing early on I had an interest in drawing and communicating feelings and emotions that way. Um, and then in high school, so Daryl and I went to high school together. Daryl is a co-founder of Push Black, and we actually ran against each other in the class, like, was it student government presidential race. Um, he won. I didn't win, but I always said that he has the ability to connect with people on a certain level face to face, and I have the ability to do it with the marketing and the communication and the visuals and the messaging, because that was a strong part of my campaign, and his part was more of the others because he was out there with the people. And we sort of continued on that relationship over time and did numerous things over time where I was in one role, he was in the other role, and getting to the point where we are now, to where we were able to build something incredible with me running the creative part of that, and he and Tarek, the other co-founder, running the business and tech side of it.
Just looking at some of the comments here coming from the Facebook Live. David Hughes, all the way from Australia, saying, "Good morning, Dr. Vibe and guests. Lean is a very good practice." And Nicole Waldron, "That number blows my mind, 9 million." Well, if it's blowing your mind, Nicole, and we know each other, that like we know some people that they won't believe it, but that's and I like she's giving the 100 and the microphone. That's solid. That is good stuff. Excellent. So let's get down and start talking about the story behind the Black History podcast. Can you take us from where the thought came to actually launch it? Because I always love when a success story happens, most people just look at the end result. I want to know, how did it start? How did the walk become a run to become 20,000 subscribers in the first few hours?
Sure, sure. So this goes back to our lean methodology as well. We knew that we didn't want to just put something together and throw it out, because it is super easy to do a podcast in theory. You just need a microphone, somewhere to save the audio, then you can upload it. Um, but we knew that with the size audience that we had, we wanted to make sure that we had staying power and that we had folks continuing to come back. So we knew we wanted to go really hard on producing this and investing in this, and not just something on the side. So we started talking about this about over a year ago, probably, and we had to identify how we would approach proceeding with this. So first, we asked, like, our community, our of subscribers, do you want this, and if so, what approach do you want? We weren't going to start with history. We're kind of agnostic, but we realized that through the conversations we were having with our audience, that was something that they trusted us to deliver to them, and so that was the most requested topic. And we really just started thinking through, how can we connect with the Black community in ways that they aren't connecting with now? And we really didn't have to reinvent the wheel, because we already have this pretty impactful approach that we do on our other platforms. And we knew we wanted to say, okay, let's just make this an extension of what we already do, because we know some folks hit us up and say, hey, um, I love the content, but and I wish we could get more of it, because our messenger content, for example, is only about 250 words, and honestly, a lot of this Black history needs to be told in much, much more depth than we're able to on that platform. So we identified what the most popular content was on our messenger platform, looking at the metrics and identifying what folks were engaging with and sharing with the most. And then we said, okay, how can we create some themes around this? What are the trends we're seeing as far as what folks are interested in? So if we saw folks were interested in content around Black women, or about revolution, or around um, the nuances of gun ownership, then we say, okay, how can we package some stories, find some subject matter experts, and then put this together in a way where folks can get a mix of the history, storytelling that they know and love, as well as more context for the present with the subject matter experts, because that's I think something that we've seen that is missing from Black history conversations is not just that these are things that happened in the past, but the past is the present and affects the present in ways that go unseen and unrecognized in many days. So in many ways, so we're trying to make those connections in all the work we do, and specifically with the podcast, we want it to be even more intentional and straight up about that. So, like I said, a year ago, we started thinking about it, testing it out. We produced it early this year, went through the editing process, released it in late May, and yeah, man, people have really been drawn to it. I think we're providing folks what we intended to provide to them, and just happy to hear that the community is really responding to it in ways that we thought that they would.
A few other questions in regards to the journey. First of all, did any of you have any podcast experience before you started?
None of us had podcast experience.
That's what I
No,
thought.
but we did, and we recognized that. So we were like, let's bring in some professionals. So we work with a production house called Lemon House, and they're known for some very well-known podcasts. So we made sure we brought in a company that could help us put our ideas into action.
What I like, and I was listening intently on what you've been sharing over the last few moments, how you didn't have expertise, so you asked for help. You didn't wing it,
For sure,
and
that's
that's
absolutely right.
that's a very important thing, and I respect that. And then you also asked your community what they wanted.
Absolutely, absolutely, super important to us. Because of we are members of the community. We care about the collective, but we don't profess to know what needs to be done. Where we want to work in collaboration with the community, and we, like you said, lean on folks that have more knowledge than us to help us achieve our goals. And that's something I think is a big takeaway for every aspect of life, really.
And another great aspect that I've been hearing, you did research, right?
Sure.
Like, and Nicole Walden saying, love the process. And that's why I'm having you expand out, because I've been listening to those key words. And a lot of times asking, research, they separate those who make it from those who don't make it.
That's very true. That's very true. And I think it's something that we've found in the whole process of building Push Black. There's some things that we, had to, by nature of being a startup, like roll our sleeves up and get our hands dirty just because of resources and time and all that type of stuff. But once you get to a certain point, it is helpful to bring others in, and you got to do the research to know like what you're getting into, and know if what you're trying to do is something that is actually um, going to do what you hope it does. So research, then testing that out, and we're quick to say, okay, this isn't working, so let's scrap this and move on to the next idea. And I think not sticking with something that's failing has helped us get as far along as we have.
Nice. Uh, Take us back, if you can remember, recording that first podcast.
Oh yeah, man, it was terrible.
Hey, don't
There-
worry. I can relate. My
yeah,
first one is still up too. Mine was recorded. All I had was a laptop and a dream.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And
it
hey,
might
that's
have
how you
still
get
posted,
started.
but do share about that first podcast.
For sure. But yeah, you got to start somewhere, man. And so, fortunately, we had the means to do something a different way. But for anybody that's looking to get into it, you got to start somewhere. So it's all good. But as far as my first podcast, I walked into the studio, and I wouldn't say I was nervous at all, but I don't think I realized how much actually goes um, into delivery and into performance of it. I couldn't just get in there and just talk. So there's thankfully I had our podcast producer directing and coaching me and doing take after take, which is a process I was familiar with from filmmaking, but I was on the other side when I was doing filmmaking. And now I'm more in the position of the performative position. So it was new to me. And there's certain things I can hear listening back to the podcast that's like, oh man, I wish I would have done that differently. I wish I knew then at the beginning of the process what I know now after the process is over. But it's all learning experience. Take it with you. One funny story is that there was somebody had slipped into the script some language that just didn't work for me. It was actually a line from Beyonce that actually fit well for the story, but just imagine me trying to do it as anywhere as good as Beyonce and even take myself seriously. So hopefully the audio is hidden somewhere forever. But yeah, that was a interesting time in the studio for sure. Me trying to say that line. We cut it out, but so you can't find it. But it's in a drive somewhere.
That's good. So May 22nd, it gets released. 48 hours, 20,000 subscribers. What
Yeah,
did you do that, man? Talk to me.
it was
And
so.
what was the team's reaction? And were you expecting that?
Yeah, so we were expecting us that was within the range of subscribers we were expecting because, as I mentioned, we test everything out. So prior to even starting the podcast, we did some tests to see how would our audience actually engage if we said that we were doing a podcast. So we were able to project a year ago what that range could be. So we were hoping for that, and we got that, but we did not expect that would put us at the top of the charts because as you probably know, a lot of the numbers they're very secretive with all the numbers. These streaming platforms for a bunch of reasons. So we weren't expecting that to shoot up at the top of the charts. We didn't know what anybody else's numbers were. So that was the biggest surprise. We were all super excited. And I don't take any credit for that. Nobody knows me as a voice or a personality, so it's not like folks are going there to hear me. It's more so that our organization has built an incredible space for folks to engage with content that they find captivating and relevant to their lives and different than what they're getting in the mainstream media. And so, because we built that trust with our audience and we delivered and built these relationships with them by sending them content daily, they definitely jumped at the opportunity when we said, "Hey, we have this podcast. Listen to the podcast," and our numbers have been growing ever since then. But it's all on the platform and the audience that is really engaged with it.
Outside of Push Black promoting the podcast, especially initially, did you use any other means to get those? And you have to tell us if it's secretive, but were there other vehicles that you use other than the Push Black platform to get that 20,000?
No. So
Okay.
we seeded this all from our platform, and I think that
Wow.
is definitely a testament to what it means when you actually build a relationship with your audience and you care about the community and you provide something of value, as I'm sure you've seen in the work you do when you
Absolutely.
actually,
Yeah.
take that time to do that.
So, and I just want people who are watching this or listening to this live on their or on replay, relationships. Push Black
Absolutely.
has from what I'm feeling, they invest on a continuous basis on their relationship with their community. So Push Black, if they want to push back on me on this, I will tell everyone who gets into the live stream space, always focus on building and engaging your community.
Absolutely. That's number one. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the ways that the media, mainstream media, approaches Black audiences is just on a transactional basis. When we want to sell you something or want to show you something, then, here you go, and then goodbye. But we know that our community means more to us than that. So building those relationships and providing something of value continuously, especially given the context of like the world we're living in, and the world we've lived in for centuries now, is super super important.
I like how you just said that a lot of media treats Blacks on a transactional basis. Could you
Yeah,
elaborate a little bit on that? I think that's a really good, as I say, knowledge bomb.
yeah. So you know, there might be there's conversations that go on in these rooms of executives and all that, and like, hey, there's a Black audience here. Let's do something for them, not because they necessarily care about the audience, but because they want the audience's attention in order to sell them something like ads. For example, like watching TV, even though TV may be uh, free, even if it's cable. So say you got cable, not cable. What is it? What I forgot what it's called with the antenna.
Oh,
It's not a
I know what you're talking
even
about.
basic cable. Basic
Yeah,
cable. So you're
basic
watching
cable.
basic cable.
Yeah, basic cable. Yep.
You're not paying for it. I don't even know if that exists anymore. But
Hey,
say
no,
you just
believe it
watch
or
it.
not, there are people. I still see people that have like the rabbit ears and all. Like I'm telling you, there's still
Yeah.
people.
Okay. Got it. So it's still relevant. Imagine getting TV completely free. You're still seeing these commercials. And if there's content promoted to you as a Black person, there's somebody in the office somewhere saying, hey, how can we sell them this stuff? But the content may not be all the way there. There has been a lot of good content directed towards Black audiences, but it's that long-term relationship that is lacking. We don't just want to give folks something and then take something and run away with it. We want it to be a continual. We're just adding value to the lives of our community and our audience, and we want them to expand and grow as people, as communities, as families. That's actually one of the reasons why we have started as a nonprofit organization, is because the mission comes before all this other stuff.
Wow, that's good. It's almost perfect timing that your podcast has been released during this time in United States history. And I know, regardless, you would have released it, but um, same question, two parts. Um, you as a Black man, and also as a member of Push Black, the relevance of not only Black America, but America better knowing their history. Why is it important for especially Black Americans, African Americans, to know their history regardless of what time it is?
For sure. So I always quote Marcus Garvey on this one. He says that a people with no knowledge of their history are like a tree without roots. And so just think of that for a second. It's like you if you don't have the roots, the foundation, then how can you actually grow? If we don't know what happened in the past, everything, the whole context, and like, then how can we grow? And I think most of the time, at least I was taught to me in the American school system, was that Black history started with slavery, then civil rights movement happened, then Obama, and now we're here. but it's so much more than that. And for me personally, once I started learning about the way back history, like pre-invasion of Africa, pre-colonialism, all that stuff, and seeing how our civilizations and societies um, were built by Black folks um, and run in ways that the Western world that we live in is not run, but still provided justice and equality and all that stuff in a framework that looked much different. I started thinking, okay, how can I reach back some more, bring other people with me, and then go forward? How can we take lessons from the past, not just learning like things on a timeline that this day, this happened. Uh, how can we not just use it for that, but use it for practical purpose? Dr. Amos Wilson talks about, we don't want like feel good history. It's feel good history is okay. These are just some black first. I don't have a problem with black first. This whole book's written on black first, but it's like, okay, that makes us feel good because we were the first black person to do something after a white person did something, but there's much more. Like there's many things that we've done before anybody else in the world did that we don't give credit for. So how can we learn those lessons from the past and plan to change the conditions that we currently live in and make the world better for future generations? And I think history is the root of all that. We won't be able to see like what's possible without seeing the great things that have been done. If we think that we only came from slavery, then anything after that is progress. And I reject that idea because I know like things that happened before slavery that are much greater than even where we are now. So that's why I think it's important to learn history, and that's why Push Black. Um, that's the approach Push Black takes to history, and the community really, really, really is drawn to it. And we get the feedback every day that folks are really, really thankful for what we're doing, and we're thankful that we have a community of people that are open to having these conversations with us on our platforms.
It's interesting. In the beginning, I wanted to get some of your background for a reason, and it seemed that this is a natural progression for you because it seems that you acknowledge your family's history. So
For
this
sure.
just seems like a natural extension of who you are as a being. Am I correct?
Oh man, you hit the nail on the head for sure. Yeah, I absolutely do. I think it is important to look to the folks that came before us, and I do that in my own life. And I think I see it as if, I'm just a continuation of them directly, and then a continuation of our ancestors that I'm not directly related to by blood. It's like a generational struggle that we're involved in, that we're engaging in, that we're trying to carry the torch of, for sure.
Yeah. I something over the last few years has become very important to me is having the intergenerational conversations. And I look at what you're doing as providing a platform for intergenerational conversations. Am I right with that?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. It makes me think of one story that we put out. We did a poll on our Facebook group, and we asked older women to give advice to younger women, um, and then we made that into a story that we shared with our audience. So that we've done things like that over time to have these conversations because unfortunately we live in a society that does not, at least in America, does not really value elders as much as our people traditionally have. And so recognizing that, uh, we try to reach back as much as possible, whether that is in examples like that or just our general work of reaching back and going forward.
Interesting you say that. And Nicole has a question. I'll get to it in just a moment. I had the pleasure early this year to go up to the Northwest Territories, which is the northwest part of Canada, for a 3-day conference. And interesting enough, every day of the conference was opened by an elder saying prayer. And at the
Mm.
end of each day, an elder said prayer.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah,
Power,
and it's
powerful.
very powerful. There's so much wisdom there, that I think that American society places emphasis on the youth, and the youth end up having a certain disdain for elders in a way that our people haven't always had. And so it is powerful when you get those opportunities to really just shut up and listen and see, like, hey, what have they been through, what do they have to share, for sure.
Right. So Nicole has a question here. She's asking, will you be adding speakers who can speak to the history of in the Caribbean at all? I know you're an African American base, but is there any thought about extending about historical
For
pro?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So we wanted to do that for the first season of the podcast. Actually, we did an episode which is my personal favorite Black history topic, the Haitian Revolution. We
Oh
did an
yeah.
episode about that,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and so we reached out to two women who are phenomenal scholars in this area from Haiti, but unfortunately, we just couldn't get the schedules to line up. Hopefully, we can have them back on. So we have a guy, um, doctor and professor, Brandon Bird, who wrote a book about the African American um, response or impact of the Haitian Revolution. And so we talked about that history with him. But we would love to get folks from Caribbean all across the diaspora to really speak to the history. And I think that a Pan African approach is necessary in helping us understand how closely we are all tied together, and how there's many elements of our cultures that still line up, and that there's this cultural continuity that is all over the diaspora that I think has been intentionally um, we've been told not to think that we are as connected as we actually are.
It's true. And another comment from Nicole saying, love the approach. It's important that we show the full history of our people from all areas of the world. For the history is similar, and yet it has some unique nuances. Very true. Very, very true, Nicole. Uh,
Absolutely.
it's a power, and I've had a chance to listen to this. It's very powerful. I have a question for you. How does the podcast how does it become a beacon for people, especially during these times? How has
Yeah,
it become the beacon when we're going through what we're going through, especially in the United States and also a little bit in Canada too?
for sure. I think it becomes a beacon by giving more context, because right now I think that we interpret our experiences in America a certain way because we don't have the full context. So when these instances of brutality and murder by police continue to happen, we respond in certain ways. And I think with a different type of context and understanding of the situation, we may respond in other ways. And let's see how specific I can get. I think there's some creative solutions to our problems that we could actually take that have been um, certain ideas that have been swept under the rug. So in the past couple of weeks, we've seen the demonstrations around the country and around the world, and that lined up with the release of the podcast in an interesting way. So although we did the full drop on that May 26th date, we've been releasing one episode per week on Fridays on our platform, just to drive more people to it. So the past 2 weeks, we've released two episodes that I think are very relevant for where we are right now. One is an interview with a brother named Douglas Jefferson, who is a vice president of the National African American Gun Owners Association, and he speaks
Oh.
to the nuances and the history of what they call the Black tradition of arms. And he goes through all these examples in the history of how we have been persuaded not to take a certain approach to our situation. How folks, even folks like Ida B. Wells and Dr. King and W.B. Du Bois, all owned firearms, but we've been persuaded to think something else about it because of the conditions we live in, and how the NRA was instrumental in passing gun legislation that was only put in place because black folks were trying, the Black Panthers were trying to do demonstrations and exercise the Second Amendment right. And then the week after that, we released the episode about the Haitian Revolution. The title is this the blueprint for Black liberation? And that's the Haitian Revolution is just an amazing story, and it shows how freedom fighters were able to recognize the system of oppression that they lived under, and decided to take matters into their own hands. When somebody is challenging your freedom as a human being, then there's certain ways that you have to really think about, like what are your options. And so I think people have been really drawn to ideas outside of the mainstream. I think a certain narrative is promoted to us to tell us how to behave. Say, hey, do it this way, don't do it that way. And all Push Black does is say, hey, we got options. This is the history of how our ancestors have handled certain situations in the past. These are the successes and the failures of that. How can we learn from these triumphs and these failures, and go into the future? Because the system hasn't changed. The system of white supremacy has not changed. It's still doing what it was created to do as far as limiting the full potential of Black people and non-white people. So how can we learn from those who came before us to challenge the system in ways that we may not be already at the front of our minds, or may not be fed to us by media narratives?
And Nicole, as you can tell, Nicole's become a big fan of Push Black because she's putting in content on the screen all the time. So this is good. This is good stuff. She's saying Ida B. Wells, W.E. Du Bois, and even Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King all have a place in one of the most obscured parts in our history, the Black tradition of gun ownership. Douglas Jefferson, the vice president of the African American Gun Association, argues that Black people, man, that must have been an interesting episode. That must have been an interesting,
great episode, one of my favorites.
Nice,
yeah, for sure.
Nice. So let me ask.
If you
go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, so one of the best points I think he made in there to really, I think, give people who may be on the fence about this idea a different perspective is that, we fight for our right to exercise the right to vote. We fight for that, and we even tell folks, hey, people died for the right to do this in America, so we got to go out and do it. But what Mr. Jefferson said is we have a whole list of rights that we should be equally ready to maintain. So when you think about the Second Amendment, Jefferson asserts that we should think the same way. People also died and fought for us to have this right. So that's something that we shouldn't give away, especially given the context that we have threats from all sides, from folks that are associated with the government agencies and folks who are just vigilantes running around taking matters into their own hands.
It's interesting when it comes to guns in America. There's over 300 million guns in the United States, and if I read correctly, over 90% of them are owned by white or non-melanated people.
Absolutely. I'm not familiar with that stat, but I trust it for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, we're starting to run down a little bit on time, so I want to see if I can get one or two other things in here. So, what, and you don't have to divulge anything, what is the process of doing a podcast? Because you get, from what I understand, you get the ideas from your community. Then, how easy is it to get a subject matter expert or an influencer to speak? So, for example, this gentleman about gun ownership in the Black community, how did you get him to appear?
Yeah. So um, we have a great team. We got a guy who's responsible for doing that. But so first, just from an organization perspective, you got to have folks who know how to professionally reach out to folks and make things happen. So that's number one. But I think we're fortunate because we have a very particular perspective that we want to share. So for these episodes, some of the things we wanted to talk about are not necessarily things that mainstream is like clamoring to find these people for, but we know our audience wants this content. So we found folks that are experts for sure, and they were happy to speak about it because these are things that they care deeply about as well. We got folks that are at major universities in the United States who have um, spoke on this podcast. We got folks, leaders of major organizations, folks who are big media personalities and experts online that have joined us, and I think they recognized as well that there's important information that our community needs to have that the mainstream is ignoring. So when Push Black reaches out to say, "Hey, we want to talk to you about this thing you're so passionate about, and we are too," then there's an alignment there, and I think that's what um, made us successful and fortunate to get the guests that we got, who are all super talented.
Did you ever think you'd be where you are now with all these subscribers and the success? Or maybe let me put it another way. What was the first, I always believe you should celebrate success. What was the first yes moment that Push Black had?
Push Black, just as an organization outside of just the podcast.
In fact, I want both Push Black and
Okay,
podcasts.
sure. So let's see. For I'll start with the podcast because that's at the top of my mind for sure. I would say the first moment like that, it was it happened pretty fast actually. I think once we saw that we actually showed up on the Apple charts at all, then we knew that we had something. Because as I said, it's sort of a mystery how people get on there and what the numbers are. So we just thought we would be, you know, get a nice audience, we'd serve our community, which is all what we intend to do. But we didn't realize um, how big of a play that was in the podcast world. And so we've been at the top of the charts ever since, well, at least in the top 10 for history and top 100 for overall. So just making the charts wasn't necessarily, let me not phrase it, let me be clear. I'm not saying that's validation of the work we're doing. Our validation comes from our community engagement, but just sort of seeing, okay, now we know how we can now we know what these numbers are and what potential lies after that, what we could potentially do and potentially achieve as we continue to engage with our community, how we can spread the message even more that we're trying to spread. So I think that was eye opening for us. And then for Push Black as an organization, I'd say it was several years ago when our number shot up to around, I want to say it's like 200,000. We did a petition around the murder of Jordan Edwards several years ago, who was unfortunately another young black male killed by the police. And when we saw our audience's response to that and sharing the petition and information, and when that brought in even more people to our platform, we knew that we had something powerful by sharing this content and encouraging people to take action. I think that's what really lit up for us. That was one of the first big
Hmm.
things that I remember. Yeah.
Excellent. So, what's next?
Yeah. So
You
we are
hit it out of the park.
definitely looking to. Thank you. We're definitely going to keep the podcast going, and we're looking to do other podcasts, um, and hopefully bring others that already exist into our orbit and create a network, and take that approach to it, because we see it as a powerful medium that a variety of Black voices and Black perspectives could exist in and contribute to. So there's a lot of talented Black folks out there, and they have a lot of value to give to the community, and we'd love to work with a bunch more people and get a bunch more shows. But we're also looking at long form video. So we're currently in development with a well known production company to do a TV show based
Okay.
on some of the content that we put out. So, and I'll make it quick. So we found that food content was of interest to our community. So obviously, food has a very it's very important in the Black community. There we go. And so we put out the stories about okra, about black eyed peas, just connecting that history to the present. Like a lot of folks don't know, I didn't know till past couple of years how certain crops, certain seeds were brought over from Africa to the Americas when our ancestors were ripped and brought over here. But these things have stayed part of our tradition. And so when we lay something like that for our audience, they're drawn to it, they engage with it, and then we we pitched it as a show. We brought in a brother by the name of Michael Twitty, who has a book on Amazon. It's been at the top of the Amazon food charts for, I guess, ever since it came out. But it's called The Cooking Gene, and he
Okay.
explores the traditions of foodways and cooking um, in the South in terms of the Black tradition. And so we're going to be doing a show based on this book, and
Nice.
super excited about that. So we're looking to really reach Black folks everywhere they are in terms of media. We think that the way that we've built these relationships and formed this community of people right now can be replicated in other areas. And we right now we are the largest nonprofit media organization for Black Americans, and we just want to continue to grow because everybody isn't on the platforms we're currently on. We want to make sure we got people who listen to podcasts, who watch TV, who watch movies, who watch the news, and everywhere in between. So we're really just trying to grow in this media space and really make an impact and provide something for our community that they currently aren't being provided.
Nice. Where can people listen? How can they subscribe? How can they become a guest if at all possible?
For sure. So you can listen everywhere podcasts are found. Apple, Spotify are the main two, so you can find us there. You can subscribe to our daily messages on Facebook Messenger. Just type in Push Black on Messenger and it'll pop up. Also, if you're an Instagram person, we're active on Instagram. We're trying to grow that, and yeah, those are the main places that we exist for now. But definitely be on the lookout for other podcasts and see us on your TV screens.
Wonderful. It's a very unique time in the history of your country. What words would you like to share for white America and Black America?
Oh well, okay. So for Black America, I think it's important to recognize that we've been here before. We've seen this before, and now the decision is ours as to how we want to handle it and move forward in a positive and productive light for our community and the best interest of our community. And for white America, I would say that I appreciate the overwhelming support that our movements have seen in the recent weeks from white America and other non-black people. And I would encourage them to also understand the black side of American history, to make sure they have the proper context to understand what is happening, why it's happening, and think through ways that they can also dismantle systems of oppression that exist in order to help facilitate a world that is one of justice as opposed to oppression.
Wonderful. Great words to close off with. He is Julian Walker, interim CEO of Push Black, and definitely subscribe to their podcast, the Black History Year podcast. I've subscribed, and it's great content and very educational, especially in this time of the history of the United States and also this in the history of the world. So I'd like to say, first of all, thanks for people who listened or watched live. Just want to shout out Clive Henry from Nottingham, England, David Hughes from Australia, Nicole from my neck of the woods, Toronto, Zakaria, thank you so much. Nicole said that she's a 9,000,001 subscriber. So she's already subscribed, and I have a feeling she may be trying to get a hold of you. So, and a great lady. And I think you got a new PR person. She's pumping up Push Black big time during this live stream.
Yeah,
and she's
really
very good at it, by the way. Very good at it.
Okay.
She's very good at it. And just like to say thanks again, everyone, for listening live on the replay. My name is Dr. Vibe. I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr.Vibe Show. I'm the host of Epic Conversations. It's the home of Epic Conversations. 2018 award winner in the innovation category given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also host and co-produce monthly online conversations for fathers that are co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization, and Dove Men Care. We're broadcasting this live on June 17th. If you want to find out more about me and what I'm doing, the best place to go is my website, drvibeshow.com. And if you're watching this before Father's Day, happy Father's Day, or wish your father, whether he is with us or he's rest in power, a happy Father's Day. This is how I close out as always. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. And one last thing I'm saying, especially during this time, Robert Smith, African-American philanthropist who paid off all the debts or all the tuition of Morehouse College grads, he says, don't waste this crisis. And also one last thanks to BIA Media for making this all happen. God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and walk good.